Hello and welcome. Before we get into today's stories, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The house on Clara Drive had already seen blood once before. Just after midnight on September 16th, 2019, Hillsborough County deputies were called back to the same Brandon, Florida home they had been to years earlier. Inside the dim, cluttered living room, a woman lay motionless on the couch. Her eyes were open. Blood pooled near her feet. The air smelled of smoke, alcohol, and neglect. The caller was her husband, now 77 years old. His voice on the 911 call was flat, uncertain, almost distant. He said he didn't know what had happened. He said she wasn't responding. He said he thought she wasn't breathing. The woman was Yona Flores. She'd been shot once in the chest. 2 vodka bottles sat nearby, one empty, one nearly so. Detectives would later find dog feces on the floor, cigarette smoke staining the walls, and multiple firearms in the house. One of them, a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver, sat in a bedroom nightstand. It held one spent casing. That gun had a history. 6 years earlier, it had been used to kill another person in the same living room. In March of 2013, Ralph Walder was 70 years old and recently remarried. A retired US Army lieutenant colonel and former lawyer, he had lived on Clara Drive for nearly 2 decades. Though his health was declining, he remained sharp, disciplined, and deeply shaped by a military career that included combat in Vietnam and a Silver Star for valor. 5 months before that spring night, Ralph married his neighbour, 41-year-old Yona Flores. She moved next door, from her house into his. The marriage was his 5th. Hers was not her first either. Shortly before midnight on March 10th, Ralph woke and left the bedroom to get water. As he moved through the house, he heard sounds coming from the living room. When he entered, he saw a man on top of his wife on the floor. Ralph turned around, went back to the bedroom, opened his nightstand and retrieved his revolver. He returned to the living room and fired 3 shots. The man collapsed and died where he fell. On the 911 call that followed, Ralph refused to render aid. He believed the man was an intruder. He believed his wife had been attacked. He was calm, direct, and unapologetic. By morning, those assumptions began to fall apart. The man was identified as 32-year-old Walter Conley. He was not a stranger. Walter Conley had been part of Yona Flores' life for years. They had dated on and off. They had lived together. They had worked together. He had rented a room in Yona's house next door even after her marriage to Ralph. Their relationship had not ended with the wedding. Walter had a tattoo of Yona's face on his arm. Ralph had met him more than once. 2 weeks before the marriage, Yona was arrested after firing a gun during an argument with Walter. She claimed she had asked him to leave repeatedly. He told police she had invited him to stay. Ralph bailed her out of jail. The charges were later dropped. Yona described herself as a heavy drinker, prone to blackouts. She told investigators she had no memory of the night Walter was killed. She said she believed her husband when he claimed he didn't know about the affair. Investigators did not find that believable. Ralph Walder was charged with second-degree murder. The state argued that what happened was not self-defense, but rage. An older husband discovering his younger wife with a lover and reacting violently. Prosecutors suggested jealousy played a role, pointing to the couple's lack of intimacy and Ralph's health issues. The defense told a different story. They argued that Ralph acted exactly as he had been trained to act. Identify a threat, neutralize it, protect the person beside him. He believed his wife was being assaulted. He believed his life was in danger next. Florida's stand your ground law applied. Ralph never changed his account. Not on the 911 call, not in police interviews, not at trial. He said he never saw the man's face. He said he told him to get out. He said the man grabbed Yona and used her as a shield. He said that if he hadn't acted, they both could have been killed. The trial lasted 3 days. Yona testified for the defense. stating she was blackout drunk and remembered almost nothing. She admitted she never fully ended the relationship with Walter. Ralph testified after her, speaking of love, loyalty, and his belief that he had done the only thing possible. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Ralph Wald was found not guilty. He left the courthouse embraced by his wife and lawyers, while Walter Connolly's family watched in silence. After the trial, Ralph gave interviews. He said he regretted the loss of life but stood by his actions. He said Walter should not have been in his home at midnight with his wife. He said he would do the same thing again. Despite public appearances, the marriage deteriorated. Both Ralph and Jonna drank heavily. Arguments became physical. Nearly a year before her death, Jonna was arrested for throwing a metal picture frame at Ralph, cutting his leg. The charge was later dropped. She told relatives she'd begun to fear him. She said he would come into her room at night while she slept. She worried he might kill her. She never left. When deputies returned to the house in 2019, Ralph told them his health had declined. He listed numerous medical problems and said he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He admitted to PTSD. He initially denied having guns in the home, then corrected himself when they were found. When questioned further, he asked for an attorney. The same revolver used to kill Walter Connolly had been used again. This time, the victim was his wife. Ralph was charged with manslaughter and released on bond. The case dragged on, delayed by health concerns, mental evaluations, and the COVID-19 pandemic. The trial never began. On January 19th, 2023, Ralph Wald died while still awaiting court proceedings. He was 80 years old. No jury would ever decide his guilt or innocence a second time. Jonna Flores was 48 when she died. Her obituary listed no surviving family, only her cat and her dog. The house on Clara Drive was left behind, carrying the weight of 2 deaths, 1 acquittal, and questions that were never answered. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came through a phone line at 6:14 p.m. The 911 operator could hear a woman struggling to breathe, her voice shaking as she begged for help. She apologized repeatedly, said she just wanted to see her children again. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she was in a car with a man she didn't know. Her name was Denise Lee. She tried to speak carefully. She gave her name. She said she was in a green Camaro. She said the man driving was a stranger. She mentioned her children were still at home. In the background, a man's voice cut through the call, sharp and suspicious, asking where the phone was. The call lasted 7 minutes before it abruptly ended. By the time it did, police across multiple counties were already searching for Denise. But the worst part was, they had been looking for her for hours. Earlier that afternoon, January 17th, 2008, had felt ordinary, unremarkable. Denise's husband, Nathan Lee, left for work that morning like he always did. He was juggling 3 jobs to support his family while Denise, just 21 years old, stayed home with their 2 young sons, Noah and Adam. The weather was unusually warm for winter in Northport, Florida. To save money, they decided to turn off the air conditioning and open the windows. Denise mentioned she planned to cut Noah's hair on the back deck later that day. That was the last normal conversation they would ever have. At around 3 p.m, Nathan tried calling Denise to coordinate grocery shopping. She didn't answer. He called again, and again. 8 times during his 25-minute drive home. When he pulled into the driveway, the windows were closed. It didn't make sense. The day was warm. The windows had been open all morning. Inside the house, nothing appeared stolen. There were no signs of forced entry, but something was wrong. Both boys were asleep in the same crib, something they had never done before. Denise's phone and keys were left behind on the couch. Denise was gone. Nathan called 911 at 3:29 p.m. Denise Lee had grown up in nearby Englewood, Florida. The eldest child of Rick Goff, a police sergeant with over 25 years of experience. Rick described her as responsible, gentle, and driven. She rarely partied, focused on school, and dreamed of becoming a speech therapist. She loved working with people with disabilities and adored Disneyland. She married her high school sweetheart Nathan Lee in 2005. 2 children followed quickly. Their life wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, quiet, safe, or so they believed. When Rick received Nathan's call telling him Denise was missing, he immediately understood the urgency. He also understood how easily missing adults, especially spouses, could be deprioritized. He didn't wait. Within minutes, Rick contacted colleagues in Charlotte and Sarasota counties. Helicopters were deployed. Officers canvassed the neighborhood. This was no longer just a missing person. It was a race against time. At approximately 2:30 p.m., a neighbor named Jennifer Ert had noticed something strange. A green Camaro sat idling in Denise's driveway. A white male was inside, unmoving. The car stayed there for about 15 minutes before leaving. Neither Denise nor Nathan knew anyone who drove a green Camaro. Police issued a bolo. At 6:23 p.m., another 911 call came in. This one from a woman named Sabrina Mello. She reported a disturbing encounter involving her cousin, Michael Lee King. Michael had arrived at her father Harold's home asking to borrow a shovel and a gas can. While they were talking, a woman jumped out of Michael's car, screaming for help and begging Harold to call the police. Michael grabbed her, forced her back into the car, dismissed it casually, and drove away. Harold hesitated. He didn't call police. Sabrina did. Minutes later, yet another call came in. At a red light in Northport, a woman named Jane Kowalski sat in her car with the windows down. From the vehicle beside her, a dark green Camaro, she heard screaming. Desperate, muffled cries. She looked over. The driver stared straight ahead. Then a hand slammed against the back window. Jane called 911 in real time, describing the car, the driver, and the direction of travel. She tried to slow down so the Camaro would pass her. She asked if she should follow. The call was chaotic. The information wasn't properly logged. Nearby patrol units were never informed. The Camaro vanished. By 6:42 p.m., police traced the burner phone used in Denise's 911 call to a man named Michael Lee King, a 37-year-old unemployed plumber facing foreclosure. No criminal record, recently divorced, living alone. When police entered his home, they found duct tape with strands of hair stuck to it. The scene suggested prolonged restraint. Michael was gone. At 9:16 p.m., a state trooper stopped a green 1995 Camaro with a black bra on the hood. Michael Lee King was behind the wheel. Denise was not with him. Michael was soaked from the waist down. A muddy shovel lay in the car. The burner phone was in his pocket, battery removed. Denise Amber Lee was found 2 days later in a shallow ditch less than half a mile away. She had been shot once in the head. Michael Lee King claimed he too had been kidnapped. He claimed ignorance. He lied. Evidence told the rest. He had practiced shooting at a gun range the morning of the crime. He abducted Denise from her home, assaulted her, drove her around Northport, and murdered her when he realized police were closing in. At trial, the jury took less than 2 hours to convict him on all counts. On September 4th, 2009, Michael Lee King was sentenced to death. Denise Amber Lee's voice became the strongest evidence against her killer. Her 911 call provided the car, the suspect, and the timeline. Without it, police later admitted, they might never have identified him. Her family went on to advocate for nationwide reforms in 911 operator training, determined that her death would not be in vain. Denise was 21 years old, a wife, a mother, a voice that refused to go silent, and in the end, that voice spoke loud enough to bring her killer to justice. When Terry Thompson walked out of prison in 2011, it wasn't freedom waiting for him. It was chaos quietly brewing in his mind. 10 months behind bars had stripped him of nearly everything. His money, his reputation, and even his wife, Marion, who'd finally had enough after 40 years of marriage. His beloved animals, once his pride, were now his burden. He was drowning in debt, his farm falling apart, and his relationship beyond repair. Neighbors said he came back a changed man. bitter, paranoid, and restless. And within weeks he'd make sure no one in Zanesville, Ohio would ever forget his name. On October 18th, 2011, the quiet little town of Zanesville woke up to what felt like a scene from a horror movie. Dozens of exotic animals, lions, tigers, bears, and wolves, were roaming free. It all began late that afternoon when Terry's neighbour, Sam Kopchak, took his horse, Red, out to pasture. Everything seemed normal until he noticed a dark shape moving between the horses. At first he thought it was a big dog, until the creature lifted its head. It was a massive black bear. Before Sam could even process that, another shape caught his eye. This time, a lion, just standing there, watching him. Sam froze. He knew enough not to run, so he slowly backed away, walking his horse back to the barn as calmly as he could. Once safe, he locked the doors, called his elderly mother, and told her what he'd seen. She immediately called Terry's house. No answer. Then she called 911. Deputy Jonathan Merry was the first to respond. As he pulled up to the Kopchak's house, a large grey wolf darted across the road behind him. Merry grabbed his rifle and followed it until it turned toward a nearby home. Headquarters told him to put it down. One shot, and it was over. But this was just the beginning. Moments later, reports came flooding in. Lions, tigers, bears, all spotted near the Thompson property. By the time Sergeant Steve Blake and John Moore, Terry's animal caretaker, arrived at the farm, the scene was pure chaos. Cages were cut open, some left swinging in the wind. A few animals were still trapped inside, but most were gone. As they moved toward the barn, flashlights shaking, they found something that stopped them cold. A white tiger crouched over what looked like a human body. It was Terry. At first, officers thought Terry had been attacked and killed by his own animals. But as they secured the area, they realized this wasn't an accident. The cages hadn't been broken. They'd been deliberately cut open. It didn't take long for the horrifying truth to settle in. Terry had released every single one of them himself. As darkness began to fall, officers from across the county, and even a team from the Columbus Zoo, raced to the property. The zoo team came prepared with tranquilizers, but local deputies knew they were running out of daylight. Wild predators were on the loose in residential areas, and tranquilizers would take too long to work. Sheriff Matt Lutz made the hardest call of his career. The animals had to be put down. Through the night, deputies went from one sighting to the next. Lions on roads, tigers near homes, bears in driveways. By sunrise, the ground around Terry's farm was littered with bodies. 49 animals had been killed. 18 Bengal tigers, 17 lions, 6 black bears, 2 grizzlies, 3 mountain lions, 2 wolves, and a baboon. Only 6 survived. 3 leopards, a grizzly, and 2 monkeys. One animal, the macaque, was never found. Officials believed it had been eaten by another predator. The scene left Zanesville stunned. Terry's body was found near his barn, with raw chicken scattered around him, almost like bait. The autopsy later confirmed he'd died by... But he was also suffering from severe heart disease. Whether he knew about it or not, no one could say. What people did agree on was that Terry had snapped. When Marion returned to the property, she was devastated. She agreed to send the surviving animals to a zoo, but asked that they eventually be buried on their land when they died. The tragedy sparked outrage worldwide, not only because of the animals' deaths, but because of how easily one man had been allowed to collect them in the first place. Before the Zanesville incident, Ohio's exotic animal laws were shockingly loose. Anyone could own a lion or a tiger without even notifying authorities. The USDA only needed to know if the animals were moved across state lines or displayed publicly. That all changed after Terry's rampage. Lawmakers scrambled to close the loopholes, and by 2014, Ohio officially banned private ownership of dozens of exotic species. Only one person died that day, Terry Thompson himself. But his final act changed the state forever. Years before all this, Terry's story had looked very different. He'd been a hometown boy with big dreams. Born just outside Zanesville, he'd earned his pilot's license young and ran a motorcycle and gun business. He was charming but impulsive, the kind of guy who always needed a new project, a new obsession. When he bought Marion a tiger cub for her birthday, it was supposed to be a surprise. Instead, It became the start of an obsession that took over his life. From cars to guns to wild animals, Terry could never get enough. He filled his property with lions, tigers, bears, wolves, monkeys, more than 50 in total. He even worked briefly with Animal Planet's Wild Kingdom and provided a lion cub for a photo shoot with Heidi Klum. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. His gun dealings caught the attention of the ATF, who raided his home and confiscated 133 firearms. After that, his marriage crumbled and his world started to unravel. By the time he walked out of prison, Terry was a man with nothing left to lose, and when he opened those cages, it was like he was setting himself, and everyone else, free in the worst way imaginable.
And it's the day that Mandan police officers arrived at that same crime scene, conducted a protective sweep of the premises, and found not one, not even two, but 3 additional victims. William Cobb, Lois Cobb, and Adam Fuhrer. Each one covered in gunshot wounds and stab wounds.
Monday morning, April 1st, 2019, just another workday in Mandan, North Dakota. At 7:19 a.m, an employee parked outside RJR Maintenance and Management, lit a cigarette, and prepared for another routine shift. Nothing seemed out of place until he stepped inside. The first thing he saw was Robert Fackler, his boss, lying on the floor. At first glance, Robert looked collapsed, maybe from a heart attack, but as the employee rushed closer, rolling him over, panic set in. Blood. Too much blood. Stab wounds. Not 1, not 2. Far more. This wasn't an accident. In that moment, everything changed. A normal day turned into something grotesque. Surreal. Sirens were called in. Paramedics arrived expecting a medical emergency, only to be confronted with carnage. Robert wasn't alone. As officers pushed through the building, they uncovered more bodies. One after another. 3 men, 1 woman, 4 victims in total. Each brutally attacked, stabbed, shot. This wasn't just murder, it was slaughter, and whoever did it was already gone. Robert Fackler co-owned RJR Maintenance with his wife. Adam Fuhrer handled repairs from toilets to air conditioning. Bill and Lois Cobb managed maintenance and accounts, a married couple with 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Together with Robert and Adam, they were known around the office as the Coffee Club, always the first in.
I had a walkthrough scheduled of move out, and they never showed, and I came here to see what was going on, and I stayed. They've been great people to lease from, always very courteous and kind and caring, and so I just want to know that they're all right. They're good people.
On April 1st, 2019, each followed their usual patterns, unaware that a predator had chosen that day, that building, those people. Bill and Lois had their smoke, Adam made his rounds, Robert handled office matters, each unaware that the next step in their morning would be fatal. To the outside world, they were ordinary, trusted, safe. But that day, ordinary became horrifying. By the time officers arrived at the RJR offices, the scene was devastating. 4 people dead, stab wounds, gunshot wounds, blood everywhere. Mandan police had never faced a case like this in years. Detectives tried to piece together what had happened. Nothing about the scene suggested a struggle outside the victims. They had been attacked inside in different areas of the office. Whoever did this knew the building, knew the routines, knew exactly how to strike. CCTV footage was requested from the nearby buildings. Employees, tenants, neighbours, all were questioned. Nothing was routine anymore. Every detail mattered. Every moment leading up to that morning became a potential clue. In those first frantic hours, the puzzle pieces were scattered across Mandan. One thing was already clear. This was no random act. Someone had planned it. And the question hanging over the city was chilling. Who would do this, and why? Detectives combed through every frame of surveillance footage. From a camera across the street, a man appeared at 6:47 a.m., entering the RJR building. Less than 20 minutes later, he was seen leaving. Orange jacket, orange mask, dark pants, gloves, a methodical figure moving with purpose. By 7:08 a.m, he was gone, but not for long. Cameras picked him walking toward a parked Ford F-150 in a nearby McDonald's lot. That truck would become the thread connecting the chaos inside RJR to someone outside. Authorities issued a BOLO alert for the vehicle, and soon someone familiar with the truck noticed it. A county sheriff's lieutenant, one of Chad Isaac's patients. Details matched: markings, rust spots, stickers, unique identifiers. The connection was chilling, precise. By April 4th, only 3 days after the murders, law enforcement had their lead. Chad Trolan Isaac, 44, chiropractor, North Dakota native, living quietly in Washburn, was pulled over at a traffic stop. Scratches on his knees, bruises on his arms, his explanation, a dog and a fall. But the truck, the clothing, the weapons, everything painted a far darker picture. Inside his trailer, agents found bleach-scented clothing, a reversible mask, a bent-tip knife, shell casings, and shoes matching those seen on surveillance. Evidence was mounting, yet questions remained. Why would a seemingly ordinary man commit such brutality? And how had he planned it so meticulously? The net had closed, but the answers, the motive, the reasoning were still out of reach. Chad Trolan Isaac was, by all appearances, a quiet man, a chiropractor in Washburn, North Dakota, licensed since 2009, running a decade-long practice with no complaints, no criminal record. He lived alone in a modest trailer, kept to himself, and had minimal interactions with the RJR staff beyond being a tenant at one of their properties. Born in Riverdale, North Dakota, he graduated high school in 1992, then served 5 years in the US Navy, stationed in Hawaii. He married locally, had a daughter, and later divorced. Over time, he drifted through several states, studied nursing briefly, then returned to North Dakota to pursue chiropractic work. Friends, neighbors, patients. They described him as calm, quiet, unremarkable. But on April 4th, 2019, that calm facade shattered. Despite his ordinary life, everything pointed to him. From the methodical surveillance sightings to the discarded truck, to the meticulous planning of the murders, law enforcement now had a suspect whose calm exterior masked a terrifying capacity for violence. Chad Isaac was taken into custody, charged with 4 counts of murder, burglary, concealment of a vehicle, and unauthorized use of a vehicle. Life, as Mandan knew it, would never feel safe again. April 1st, 2019 began like any other morning, but inside RJR, the day had been meticulously planned. At 5:25 a.m, Chad parked his truck at a McDonald's lot, about a 15-minute walk from the office. He had already tested the route a week prior. By 6:30 a.m, Bill and Lois Cobb arrived. 15 minutes later, Chad followed, entering the building. Adam Fuhrer walked in at 7:06 a.m, Robert Fackler at 7:06 a.m, each unsuspecting, each trapped. The attacks were calculated. Bill was shot 4 to 8 times, stabbed 28 times. Lois endured 48 stab wounds, 16 to her face and neck, and a gunshot to the chest. Adam suffered 3 gunshot wounds and 11 stab wounds. Robert was stabbed 11 times, 3 wounds piercing his heart. By the time Chad left, he had stolen Robert's truck, ditched it minutes later, and disappeared into the morning. Months of investigation followed. Evidence tied Chad to the crime: his truck, clothing, weapons, shell casings, and traces of blood. He got life in prison without the possibility of parole.
April 1st, 2019 is a day that many people will never forget. It's the day that Justin Bachheim walked into work at RJR Maintenance and Management Company and found his boss, Robert Fackler, lying on the shop floor, covered in a pool of blood. It's the day that paramedics arrived at what they believed was a cardiac arrest call, only to find their victim covered in stab wounds. And it's the day that Mandan police officers arrived at that same crime scene, conducted a protective sweep of the premises, and found not 1, not even 2, but 3 additional victims: William Cobb, Lois Cobb, and Adam Fuhrer. Each one covered in gunshot wounds and stab wounds.
I'll read the jury's verdict at this time. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action, do find the defendant, Chad Trollin Isaac, number 1, as to the offense of murder of Lois Cobb as charged in count 1 of the information, guilty. Number 2, as to the offense of murder of William Cobb as charged in count 2 of the information, guilty. Question 3. As to the offense of murder of Adam Fuhrer, as charged in count 3 of the information, guilty. Number 4. As to the offense of murder of Robert Faulkner, as charged in count 4 of the information, guilty.
He's one of the most dangerous men I have ever come across. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, had he not been caught, he would have gone on to kill further people.
Easter Sunday, 2023. Instead of laughter, hymns, and the smell of roast lamb, Mercy Island woke to something darker. Ellie Baxter pushed open the gate to her parents' home. The blinds were still drawn. 2 days had passed without a single call, not even a holiday greeting. That wasn't like her mother. That wasn't like her father. She walked around to the back, peering through the conservatory glass, and then she froze. Stephen and Carol Baxter sat side by side in their armchairs, motionless, heads slumped, eyes closed, the kind of stillness you don't mistake for sleep. Panic surged. Ellie grabbed her phone. First, she dialed Luke DeWitt, the family friend who lived only streets away. Then, trembling, she called 999. Within minutes, Luke came running. He pressed the phone to his ear, trying to explain to the dispatcher what they were seeing. His voice wavered. They're not moving. They've been like this for at least a day and a half.
On the frame. They just
Right, okay. Right, are you with the patient now?
They are there.
Right, okay.
They're like, they're stiff.
You're saying there, so just to confirm, how many people are hurt?
Sorry, I can't hear you. Well,
How many people require help, just to confirm?
2. I have to do one. So I need to come outside. It's their daughter you can hear.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I'm organising help you now. Just stay on the phone with me. So just tell me exactly what's happened from what you know, please, just so we can all go to the best place.
Well, we just turned up to the house and we hadn't really heard from anyone for about a day and a half. So we came round and their daughter got here first, and I think they got round to the back, sort of through their conservatory that they were sitting in their armchairs not moving.
Paramedics smashed a window to get inside. Cold bodies. No pulse, no blood, no forced entry, no obvious cause. Just 2 lives ended, neatly, in silence. Something about the scene was wrong. Very wrong. Mercy Island didn't look like the kind of place where evil lurked. A small coastal community, only 9 miles from Colchester, its beaches had been praised as some of the best in the United Kingdom. Generations lived and died here, attending the same schools, raising families, joining the yacht club. Stephen and Carol Baxter were among them. Successful, respected. Carol ran Sea Splash, a bathroom accessories business best known for its curved bath mats. Stephen, her husband of more than 2 decades, worked as a global lead for operational risk at a major real estate firm. Their home, worth over £1 million, sat on a quiet street in West Marseille. They should have been enjoying their retirement years, travelling, spending time with their grandchildren, celebrating holidays like Easter with family. But inside that conservatory, the image told a different story. No struggle, no sign of violence, no clue as to why. The community whispered. Had it been an accident, a carbon monoxide leak, or something far more sinister? Carol Baxter's health had been faltering for years. She was only in her 60s, but fatigue clung to her like a shadow. Doctors diagnosed Hashimoto's disease, an autoimmune disorder that attacks the thyroid gland. It left her forgetful, scattered, sometimes behaving as if she were years older than she was. Her daughter Ellie remembered silly mistakes, moments when Carol seemed lost in her own home. Concern turned into desperation. Carol would try anything to get better. Across the Atlantic in Florida, a supposed endocrinologist named Dr. Andrea Bowden prescribed herbal remedies, strange potions meant to rebalance her thyroid. Bowden sent instructions through emails. Carol trusted them. Too much. And always, there was Luke DeWitt, the helpful family friend. He'd arrive with smoothies, herbal concoctions, energy bombs meant to perk Carol up. He filmed her symptoms, sending videos overseas for Bowden to assess. Carol even reassured the doctor in one message, "Luke always makes all of your potions." But despite the remedies, Carol wasn't improving. In February 2022, a hospital discovered a 177mm tack lodged in her digestive system. No one could explain how it got there. Something, or someone, was poisoning her life. Luke DeWitt was 33, a computer science graduate who had lived on Mercy Island all his life. To most, he seemed harmless. Odd, yes. Shy. Nerdy. But kind. He volunteered at a soup kitchen, helped with the town carnival, spent evenings gaming or attending Comic-Con. To the Baxters, Luke was almost family. A decade earlier, he had redesigned their company's website. From there, he slipped deeper into their lives, sorting Carol's medications, joining her at the gym, sharing cups of tea, encouraging her when illness wore her down. Neighbours thought it was touching. Here was a young man, still living with his mother, caring for an older couple as if they were his own. The Baxters' children noticed his constant presence but brushed it off. Their parents pitied Luke. He was lonely. He was nerdy weird. He needed company. What no one knew then was that Luke's help came with strings, invisible ones. Strings he was quietly tightening. Because Luke wasn't just a helper, he was watching, recording, and planning. At first, detectives suspected a silent killer. Carbon monoxide. The windows were thrown open, the house aired out, but monitors revealed nothing. No gas leak, no accident. Then came the toxicology results, and with them, horror. Both Stephen and Carol Baxter had consumed lethal doses of fentanyl. In the United States, fentanyl fueled an epidemic. But in the UK, it was rare, a drug reserved only for terminal patients in extreme pain. Carol wasn't prescribed it. Stephen wasn't prescribed it. So how had it entered their bodies? Pathologists found more. Carol's system contained dangerously high levels of promethazine, an over-the-counter sedative. The combination of the two drugs wasn't an accident. It was a cocktail, designed to kill. The Essex police officially opened a murder investigation, and in the quiet streets of West Mercia, a chilling question spread. Who would want the Baxters dead? The first cracks appeared in the family's grief when they went through the house. Hidden among the Baxters' belongings was a short 5-part will. Not the official document filed with their solicitors, a new one. This will left control of Seasplash, their thriving bath mat business, not to their children, but to Luke DeWitt. Even stranger, detectives learned that less than an hour after Luke had last been seen with the couple, a transfer of £6,000 had been made into the company account. The signature on it? Stephen Baxter's. But investigators weren't convinced Stephen ever touched it. The picture was getting darker. Luke, the ever-helpful friend, the one comforting the daughter at the scene, had stood to gain control of the business. He had access to the house. He had been the last to see them alive. And now he had a motive. By July 2023, detectives had enough. The will was fake, the money transfer suspicious, and fentanyl patches had been traced back to Luke's late father, prescribed during his cancer treatment. When police searched Luke's bedroom, they found opened capsules, leftover patches, and even a box of tacks, just like the one once discovered in Carol's body. The quiet neighbour wasn't a helper, he was a predator. On a warm summer morning, Essex police knocked on Luke DeWitt's door. The officer's words cut through the silence. "Luke, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder."
The reason we're here today, mate, is I'm going to have to arrest you, mate, alright? And that's on suspicion of murder. All right, as part of a police investigation, you've been identified as being a suspect in relation to the deaths of Caroline and Stephen Baxter, 27th and 9th of April 2023, all right? Okay. So that means you don't have to say anything, but may harm your defence. If you do not mention any questions, something you may later on in court, anything you do say may be evidence. So we'll be taking you up to Chelmsford custody, and then there'll be a process from there, mate, all right?
He was sentenced to life,